What's up, everybody? Welcome in to a special edition of SSPN Reacts. I'm sorry Ethan can't be here to celebrate with you guys, but don't worry. We will take care of that tomorrow night in our post game against the Memphis Grizzlies. Because of the timing of this, I'm not sure if De'Aaron Fox will be playing in that game tomorrow or if there will be some travel stipulations, but it doesn't matter because we also found out that we will be doing our Wednesday post game as well. I got my work schedule, so that works out. So, regardless, I think by Wednesday, we should be seeing De'Aaron Fox in the silver and black. And of course, that's what you guys are all here for. I kind of talked about some scheduling stuff there. But Ethan is helping a family member move tonight. So, unfortunately, he can't record the reaction with me. We probably would have gone live if that was the case. But regardless, we'll talk about that with him tomorrow night. And of course, be breaking down some of the on-court film that we get on De'Aaron Fox, hopefully this week, as soon as Wednesday when the Spurs play the Atlanta Hawks, fittingly on ESPN. But again, let's talk about the trade itself. Let's bring up the details. Let's not fuddle around too much longer. The Spurs acquire De'Aaron Fox as well as Jordan McLaughlin. Don't think he'll crack the rotation, especially with CP3 still being on the roster. We'll talk about rotations a little bit more tomorrow. Maybe I'll dive into it a little bit here. But again, getting to what else you guys see on the screen, and if you're listening on podcast, again, the Spurs acquired De'Aaron Fox as well as Jordan McLaughlin, and the Sacramento Kings get Zach LaVine, Sidy Cissoko, who also departs the San Antonio Spurs, 3 first-round picks, a 2025 Charlotte first-round pick, which I believe is from the San Antonio Spurs, a 2027 San Antonio Spurs pick, as well as a 2031 Minnesota pick, as well as 3 second-round picks, a 2025 Chicago pick. I believe that's San Antonio's, or comes from San Antonio, even though it's Chicago's pick, a 2028 Denver pick, as well as their own 2028 pick back in the second round. And then the Bulls, the third the third team that participated in this trade, they acquire Zach Collins, Tre Jones, Kevin Herter, and their own 2025 pick via the San Antonio Spurs. So because they put via San Antonio, maybe some of those other ones, like the 2025 Charlotte pick, wasn't via San Antonio, but I'm pretty sure we had a protected Charlotte pick in this 2025 draft. So y'all can correct me on that or clarify in the comments there. Maybe I could look it up here in a second as well. But I feel pretty confident we had that Charlotte pick. But all of that stuff is here nor there. These are the details. The Spurs give up Sidy Cissoko, Zach Collins, Tre Jones, and a hodgepodge of picks to acquire De'Aaron Fox. Me and Ethan, in our last episode that we had, in our last post game where we talked about all of the news surrounding De'Aaron Fox and who potentially we would give up or who we wouldn't give up, the conversation was surrounding like Devin Vassell and Stephon Castle. And I wanted to get to that because I was kind of saying in that episode, as much as throughout the clip that we made and also the stream that we were there, I said I was kind of changing my mind a little bit more as the conversation went on. I was a little bit more on the Devin side when it came to that conversation. After 24 hours and thinking that out a little bit, I sent Ethan a text and I had flipped myself because just at the end of the day, when it comes to that conversation, I know that's a little bit irrelevant here because we didn't have to give up either of those guys, which makes this so much more better. It makes it even happier for me as a Spurs fan as well as Ethan. It feels like a fleece for us in the minds of San Antonio Spurs fans. But getting back to the conversation that Ethan and I had about Devin Vassell and Stephon Castle, just for any future potential trade talk that we have, as much as I'm sure the Spurs will wait a little bit after this blockbuster, if you will. Although it doesn't feel as much of a blockbuster with Luka Doncic and Anthony Davis being traded the other night as well. But obviously, this is still huge with multiple former All-Stars involved. I believe Zach LaVine has an All-Star appearance, but y'all get my point. This is still a pretty big trade involving some star players. And man, that's making me lose my train of thought here. Well, I was getting back to Devin and Stephon. That was the conversation we were having. Um, Essentially, I flipped on that when it comes to my opinion. I would, if we had had that conversation again when it came to this trade, if today uh, the trade came out that Devin Vassell was included, that's what I would have preferred. As much as earlier on the episode that we talked last time, I was saying initially that's how I could have would have felt with the shooting as well as the fit, and maybe the win now aspect of it. But when it comes to comparing Devin and Stephon, like I said earlier, for any future trade discussions, I'm on the Stephon Castle side of things. Just, I mean, as a rookie, he's already a better defender than Devin. Again, this conversation is kind of a little bit besides the point, but I just want to talk about it. And it's also just me here, so I needed to have some talking points to go over here. Um, just because of the fact that what we've already seen so far this year, his physicality plays a big role in that, as well as just I think his natural basketball IQ and feel defensively. I mean, you saw some of the plays that he made against James Harden recently, as well as some of the other games that we've seen as of late, where he's picking guys up full court, and and slapping the ball out like it's almost a video game, and then getting a free transition bucket or at least a turnover. It's menacing Clamps defensive ability from Stephon Castle. Um, on top of his malleability. And I just think bluntly, he just has a higher ceiling. And I think he can play the two guard. I love Devin still. I think that we've seen some defensive leaps from him this season. And I think Stephon already, despite those leaps, still being at a higher level defensively as a rookie is a testament to how high his potential can be and to how good he is already. So that was just something I wanted to get off my chest after I was thinking about it just a little bit more. But we kept both of them. So back to the trade. That just makes things even better. I mean, it adds to the depth. And for this season, this is the main point here in this reaction. I know I've talked about a lot of things here in the first 7 minutes, but my key takeaway for the San Antonio Spurs is this makes them a playoff team. Um, or I mean, at least a playoff and play-in bona fide contender. Before coming into this season, we were saying that it was going to be a fringe play-in team or a fringe playoff team. I think now this makes them for sure a contender in that race. And I really think they're going to get in with this move. Maybe I'll be proven wrong. Maybe that's me looking at this through rose-colored glasses in a gauntlet of a Western Conference that will still be a gauntlet with this move as you got the Bulls involved, sending Zach LaVine to the Kings. So it's not like the Kings are just falling off a cliff completely. Now, we could get into a whole conversation of do I think that the Spurs now are they better than the Kings? You know what I mean? But again, that's a whole nother conversation. They're probably still around the same level, fighting for a play-in spot this season. I know I said I feel like with this De'Aaron Fox move that makes the Spurs a bona fide play-in team or a bona fide playoff contender. But regardless of that, the Spurs as of right now are still 21-24. So they're going to be in that same range with the Kings fighting for that last playoff spot. But I think this makes the Spurs they now have a legitimate chance to maybe even jump up out of the play-in. I think that's a little bit of a reach just because of where they're at. But I think with the improvement that we've seen so far this season, on top of the fact Zach Collins wasn't even playing, and then you've got Tre Jones, which as much as Tre Jones has had some good games as of late, Tre Jones, if we're just being completely blunt, Tre Jones, thank you for everything that you did as a San Antonio Spur, if you ever see this. But if we're just being completely objective, listing players on the Spurs when it comes to their level of impact, like Tre Jones is down there. I don't mean that in a mean way, but he's in the seven. I mean, he's like 7 or 8 range. You know what I mean, max. And there might that's just me spitballing here. I didn't even really think about that, but so maybe it's even lower than 7 or 8. But the point that I'm getting at there is the Spurs didn't give up very many rotation players. They gave up one, you know. So I think with the improvement that they've already had this season, adding De'Aaron Fox into that, I think it's only going to make that much better. So I really think that they have a chance to jump in to the playoffs, at least the play in for sure. They are on the outside looking in as of right now. Let me go ahead and pull up the rankings. I was just kind of talking right there again, spitballing, as I mentioned earlier, going off the top of my head. But let's go ahead and make this a little bit easier for everybody. The Spurs are 12th in the Western Conference as of today, and they are 2.5 games back, or excuse me, no, just 2 games back from the Sacramento Kings and the Golden State Warriors for a spot in the play-in. So definitely still a shot. It is getting a little bit further, but out of the bottom 4 teams in the Western Conference, probably the only team that has a realistic chance, especially with this acquisition, is the San Antonio Spurs. So it's going to be really interesting to see how things play out. Um, I'm sorry that Ethan couldn't be here for this one again, but I wanted to give you guys something tonight to react to this trade. And again, we'll get into the nitty gritty. We'll get into the fit. And everything like that a little bit more in tomorrow's episode, but wanted to give you guys a reaction. We're not going to wrap it up just yet. I'm going to do a little bit of a couple more things for you guys, and then we'll wrap this episode up. But again, I do think that the Spurs have a chance to jump up. Now, as I'm looking at this a little bit more, I will say I think maybe jumping out of the play-in is a little bit hefty and too tall of a task. I guess it is technically only 5.5 games when you think about it. So that's not that crazy, but maybe let me cap myself. I think maybe they could potentially get to like 7 or 8, and that would still be a lot of hefty work. And probably the Suns would be a little bit more realistic than catching the Timberwolves there. But there's a ton that has to play out. There's also a lot of chemistry stuff that has to play out on the floor. Like there are going to be some kinks that are going to have to be worked out with everybody learning to play with each other. I've been talking about that all year with, Devin Vassell getting integrated back into the starting lineup. So if I'm going to use the logic there, I got to use the logic on De'Aaron Fox as well. As well as just De'Aaron Fox gaining chemistry with the rest of the team, as well as how lineups are going to look. And that's how I'll end off the episode here. So we talked about standings. What else did we talk about? I talked a little bit about Steph versus Devin. That was a little personal rant. And then obviously we put up the trade details and talked about how we felt like that was a fleece. But again, just to give you guys some lineups here, to wrap up this episode with some predictions. So maybe Wednesday, because probably tomorrow, everything will still be being processed. De'Aaron will be being flown here, getting settled in, all that stuff. I will say, though, on Wednesday, obviously, De'Aaron Fox as the starter at point guard. Okay, this is where things get interesting already. I'm doing it still. Stephon Castle at the 2. We're keeping him in the starting lineup, regardless of injury, just because of how well he's been playing. Devin Vassell at the 3, like we've been rolling with. Harrison Barnes at the 4. Wemby at the 5, obviously. Then off the bench, here's the rotations. We got CP3 now as our 6th man. What a twist. Now, earlier I was thinking, I texted Ethan this literally. I was like, who's going to be our backup PG? Is it going to be Blake? Is it going to be Jordan McLaughlin? Oh, that's right. CP3's on the team. Duh. That makes it, pretty simple there. I don't think we would start them together. I mean, that would shock me, I say that would shock me. There's like a 5% chance that I think maybe that could happen. I definitely personally don't agree with that, but maybe you could see De'Aaron Fox and CP3 out there in the starting lineup, but I don't think so. I really hope not as well. So anyways, back to the rotations. So again, De'Aaron Fox, Stephon Castle, Devin Vassell, Harrison Barnes, and Wemby. This is my personal predictions. That's the starting lineup. Off the bench, we got CP3. Okay. Now, who do we got after that? Obviously, Julian is going to be in here somewhere. I can't believe I'm thinking shooting guard. I'm thinking Malachi. I don't know who I'm forgetting. I know we've been doing a lot of 9-man rotations recently too. That's the other thing. But CP3, Julian Champagnie, Jeremy Sohan. Who am I forgetting? Well, Tre Jones is another guy who we were playing, and he's traded. That's who I was forgetting. And I don't know if we would run. Are we gonna run Charles? I wouldn't mind playing Blake. I would definitely rather play Blake over Malachi off the bench. But I'm trying to think. No, yeah, I mean CD, Trey, and Zach are the only people we gave up, so I don't think I am forgetting anybody. Okay, here. I'm gonna look at the Spurs roster just to double check myself because for some reason I feel like I am, but I know I'm not. And as I'm looking at the Spurs roster, it is being clarified. So man, I mean that's 8 guys right there. Who do I feel? Oh, I knew I was forgetting somebody. Y'all are in the comments like this guy right now. Keldon Johnson. Oh my goodness. How could I forget that? Oh my goodness. I'm the guy who's always like, y'all are hating on Keldon too much. And he's been having some good games recently. Man, and I'll throw Charles Bassey in there too, just for whatever purpose. I don't mean that in a bad way to Charles in any way. I'm just saying he's kind of been phased out of the rotation recently. Maybe we commit to him more that now that we've traded Zach Collins. I know he started the last game, but Wemby was injured, so like I'm not sure how much stock to put into that. Just with how much we've been playing Sohan off the bench, but maybe he is going to get consistent minutes off the bench at the 5 now. I think I would prefer that over Jeremy, especially in certain matchups. But also, if they don't do that, I understand. Especially if they make another move for a backup big upgrade and keep Charles as the third string big at the trade deadline this Thursday, because we still have time for that this week. And Ethan and I will also get into that tomorrow because that's another request that I still have. That this trade, as much as offloading Zach Collins' contract is something that we wanted, I think as much as I love my boy Chuck Bass, I still think I would prefer. Well, one, we really only have him and Wemby as a big. I know you can throw Mamu in there, but he's not somebody who's really going to match up with a true traditional center. So I think we need that. So I would like to see that move at the deadline as well. But if we don't, honestly, I'm really not mad at a backup lineup of CP3, Julian Champagnie, Keldon Johnson, Jeremy Sohan, and Charles Bassey. And we do. You know what I just thought about too is we have an open roster spot as well with Julian with Sidy Cissoko being traded. So maybe we could pick up a two-way guy. For those of y'all who maybe are just people who are big Spurs fans who are trying to find all the content, and this is your first time here, with the De'Aaron Fox news. I smile and smirk there because there's a certain two-way player that the SSPN OGs know about. We need another big. Call it Dominic Barlow, baby. This is the perfect opportunity. But I just had that thought that potentially that could be a reality, and he just gotta start with the Hawks the other day. But anyways, I could go on and on about my boy Dom Beasy. That is not what this is about. But genuinely, I believe the Spurs do have an open roster spot. So, maybe there's somebody else out there that we could go get in free agency. Maybe a European player. I believe Gershon Yabusele is still on the 76ers, but he wouldn't fill the need anyway. God bless him. As much as he would be a solid 4 for us maybe down the road as a role player. But and of course the Wemby connection. But we really need a big backup 5. But I'm down with Charles Bassey, CP3, Julian Champagnie, Keldon Johnson, Jeremy Sohan, and Charles Bassey, especially if he's next to Sohan. I think that helps out a lot as well. So that is my predictions for the rotations. I love the depth here, man. Like I said, that backup center thing spot. Sorry, I couldn't talk there for a second. Is still my biggest question. But I definitely still think, as Ethan and I have talked about at nauseum, that Charles Bassey is much more playable than Zach Collins was as it got to that point. Zach Collins, also, thank you for everything you did as a Spur, for all the good moments, all the fights that you got in. I know me and Ethan, were very critical down the stretch, but still, there were a lot of good memories that you brought to San Antonio in your time here, and never complained, was always on the bench being a great teammate. Same thing with Tre Jones, man. Shout out to both of those guys, as well as Sidy Cissoko, man. Shout out to Sidy. I'm sorry things didn't work out. I hope you become a defensive tank, as well as a downhill lob and dunk threat, and just a physical role player. I hope you carve out an NBA career, and maybe someday we can reunite. That's my thoughts on Sidy Cissoko departing the San Antonio Spurs. But for the final time, I've probably blabbered on long enough. De'Aaron Fox, Stephon Castle, Devin Vassell, Harrison Barnes, and Victor Wembanyama is my prediction for the starting lineup. And then for the backup rotation, CP3, Julian Champagnie, Keldon Johnson, Jeremy Sohan, and Charles Bassey, or maybe a center that we sign or trade for. But also, if we have to give up anybody in this rotation, honestly, I don't know if I really, I don't know if I really, I don't know if it's worth it at that point. At that point, let's roll with Charles, man. Charles is like 23, 24. Let's develop my man. Let me stop hating on my boy Chuck Bass. Let me have faith on him, or faith in him. But anyways, I'll wrap it up with that, you guys. Thanks so much for coming and hanging out in this reaction episode. Tell me your thoughts on the trade as well as your lineup predictions in the comments below. And also give me your other thought. Here's a question for you guys. Will the Spurs make another trade at the deadline for a backup big, like I said, potentially, or maybe something else? Is this the final move that they make at the deadline? All things that you guys can discuss in the comments. Let us know. We appreciate you guys for hanging out today. If you enjoyed the content, hit that like and that subscribe button below. If you want to stay updated with the show, follow us on X or Twitter, whatever you want to call it, at SSPNYT, at Jude McLaren, and at Ethan_Quintero. We appreciate you guys. We'll catch y'all in the next one. Go Spurs, go!